Some moments arrive without warning and quietly change the course of an entire life. Mine began on a bright Saturday afternoon when someone I hadn't seen in nearly 8 years knocked on my front door with nothing but a faded backpack, tired eyes, and a question that instantly made my heart race. My best friend stood there looking like a shadow of the fearless person I once knew. Before I could even ask what had happened, only a few words escaped those trembling lips. "Can I stay here tonight?" In that single moment, memories, confusion, and concern collided inside me. I had no idea that opening my door that afternoon would lead me through one of the most emotional journeys of my life and teach me that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply refusing to let someone face their darkest night alone. If stories about kindness, forgiveness, and second chances mean something to you, welcome to a journey of hearts. We'd love to know what part of this story stays with you, and if you enjoy heartfelt stories like this, consider following the channel for more journeys that remind us of the goodness people are capable of. The afternoon sun poured through the neighborhood trees as Rowan Mercer finished watering the flowers outside his small home. At 36, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. After losing both of his parents within 3 years, he had learned to appreciate quiet mornings, honest work, and evenings spent reading on the front porch. His house was modest but warm, filled with photographs, handmade furniture, and little reminders that happiness didn't always arrive in grand packages. Yet beneath that peaceful routine remained an empty space where his oldest friendship had once lived. Years earlier, Rowan and Cedric Hale had been inseparable. They had survived childhood's scraped knees, teenage mistakes, first heartbreaks, and impossible dreams together. Everyone believed they would remain lifelong friends. But adulthood often moves faster than promises. Careers, misunderstandings, distance, and pride slowly built walls neither of them knew how to climb. Messages became fewer. Calls stopped completely. Eventually silence settled between them like an unwanted stranger. Rowan often wondered what had become of Cedric but convinced himself that everyone eventually chose their own road. Still, every birthday, every holiday, and every time he drove past their old fishing spot, he found himself hoping his friend was happy somewhere. The knock on the door shattered those thoughts. When Rowan opened it, he almost didn't recognize the man standing before him. Cedric's clothes were dusty, his beard uneven, and exhaustion covered his face more heavily than the afternoon shadows. His eyes carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. The confident smile Rowan remembered had disappeared completely. Without thinking, Rowan stepped aside and welcomed him inside. The living room smelled of fresh coffee and baked bread. Cedric looked around quietly, almost as though he had entered another lifetime. Rowan placed a warm meal in front of him, but Cedric hesitated before taking the first bite. Hunger eventually defeated pride, and he ate slowly, thanking Rowan with every glance more than with words. Neither of them rushed into explanations. Sometimes silence between old friends carries more honesty than endless conversation. Outside, children laughed as they rode bicycles beneath the afternoon sunshine. Inside, two former best friends slowly remembered what trust had once felt like. As the hours passed, Cedric finally revealed the truth. A successful business had collapsed after trusting the wrong partners. The financial loss destroyed nearly everything he owned. His marriage ended under the pressure. Friends who had once celebrated every success quietly disappeared. Family members who had always depended on him suddenly stopped answering his calls. One mistake had become another, until he found himself sleeping in his car with nowhere left to turn. The hardest part wasn't losing money. It was believing he no longer deserved anyone's kindness. For weeks he had driven from town to town, convincing himself he could solve everything alone. But loneliness is a heavy burden, and eventually every road led him back to one memory that refused to fade. He remembered the little house Rowan had once dreamed of owning and wondered whether that dream had ever come true. Standing on the porch that afternoon had been the hardest thing Cedric had ever done. As Rowan listened, old disappointments quietly dissolved. None of the years apart mattered anymore. The only thing standing before him was someone who had once carried him through his own darkest days. Years ago, after Rowan lost his father, it had been Cedric who stayed awake every night helping him rebuild his life. Friendship had never been measured by perfect attendance. It was measured by who remained when life became unbearable. That evening they prepared dinner together. The simple act of chopping vegetables, setting plates on the table, and laughing over old childhood memories slowly replaced years of distance with something gentler. After dinner, Rowan showed Cedric the guest room. It wasn't luxurious. Just clean sheets, a warm blanket, and sunlight waiting beyond the curtains for morning. Cedric stood quietly in the doorway. For the first time in months, he felt safe. That night neither man slept much. Rowan wondered whether he had done enough. Cedric wondered whether he deserved any of it. Morning arrived with birds singing outside the windows. Bright sunlight filled the house, making everything feel lighter than it had the day before. Instead of asking when Cedric planned to leave, Rowan simply handed him another cup of coffee and invited him to spend the day helping repair an old wooden fence behind the house. Hour after hour they worked side by side beneath the warm blue sky. Something remarkable happened. As broken boards became whole again, so did their friendship. Over the following weeks Cedric insisted on earning his place. He repaired furniture, painted fences, organized Rowan's workshop, and helped elderly neighbors with yard work. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood that a quiet man was helping anyone who needed an extra pair of hands. One elderly widow asked Cedric to fix her porch steps. Another neighbor needed help replacing storm-damaged fencing. A local bakery asked whether he could repair shelving. Without realizing it, Cedric slowly rebuilt something far more valuable than a career. He rebuilt his confidence. Rowan watched every small victory with quiet pride. He never treated Cedric like someone broken. Instead, he treated him exactly as he always had, a capable man simply passing through a difficult season. Months later, the owner of a local woodworking company noticed Cedric's craftsmanship and offered him a full-time position restoring antique furniture. The salary wasn't extraordinary. But the opportunity was priceless. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Cedric had steady work, purpose, and hope. His first paycheck carried unexpected meaning. Instead of buying something for himself, he quietly replaced Rowan's aging washing machine while Rowan was at work. When Rowan returned home, he immediately understood. Neither man spoke. They simply smiled. Some debts can never be repaid with money. Only gratitude. Seasons changed. Spring flowers gave way to bright summer afternoons. Their lives settled into a rhythm that felt wonderfully ordinary. Weekend fishing trips returned. Neighborhood cookouts became tradition. Laughter echoed through the little house more often than silence ever had. One afternoon Cedric admitted something he had never confessed before. The night he knocked on Rowan's door, he had already decided that if no one answered, he would simply keep driving without any destination. He wasn't looking for charity. He was looking for one reason not to give up on people. Rowan realized how close the world had come to losing someone simply because shame had convinced him he was alone. Kindness hadn't solved every problem overnight. But it had interrupted despair long enough for hope to return. That realization stayed with Rowan for the rest of his life. Years later, whenever neighbors faced difficult times, Rowan and Cedric quietly became the first people to appear with groceries, tools, blankets, or simply a listening ear. They never asked questions people weren't ready to answer. They simply remembered what one open door had once meant. Eventually the little guest room welcomed many others: a young college student escaping hardship, an elderly man recovering after surgery, and even a family displaced after a house fire. Each person arrived carrying fear. Each person left carrying hope. The house became known throughout the community as a place where dignity mattered more than circumstances. One sunny afternoon, while repairing another neighbor's porch, Cedric looked across the street toward Rowan's home. The front door stood open. just as it had for him. He smiled quietly. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with flashing lights or dramatic speeches. Sometimes they arrive as a simple invitation to come inside. If this journey touched your heart, we'd love to hear what part stayed with you the longest. Stories become even more meaningful when people share the moments that reminded them of hope, friendship, or the kindness they've experienced in their own lives. Special request: tell us in the comments about someone whose kindness changed your life. Your story might become the encouragement someone else needs today. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees, Rowan and Cedric sat together on the porch exactly as they had dreamed of doing as children. They talked about ordinary things, laughed over forgotten memories, and watched families walk safely through the neighborhood. Neither of them mentioned the painful years that had separated them. Those years no longer defined their friendship. What mattered was that one difficult afternoon, when everything seemed lost, one person found the courage to knock, and another found the compassion to answer. Life rarely gives us the chance to rewrite the past, but it often gives us the opportunity to change someone's future. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer isn't money, advice, or perfect solutions. Sometimes it's a warm meal, a quiet room, a listening heart, and the simple promise that no one has to face their darkest night alone. And perhaps that is where the strongest friendships are truly born, not in the easy seasons of life, but in the moments when someone whispers, "Can I stay here tonight?" And here's the words every hurting soul longs to hear: "You're already home." If you'd like, I can also make it longer, around 2,200–2,500 words, with even more suspense and cinematic detail for better YouTube audience retention.